Have you ever wondered what Amsterdam is all about? Don't just read about the culture that has accepted cannabis. Experience it firsthand with CS Travel's Sensible Amsterdam Tour with NORML. Travel to one of Europe's most beautiful cities this January for an educational and recreational visit to a city that regulates cannabis like alcohol. CS Travel has arranged an exclusive visit for reform-minded Americans that includes a private tour of some of Amsterdam's most renowned coffee shops, educational seminars with coffee shop proprietors, local law enforcement, members of the Cannabis Retailers Association, and NORML staff. Entertainment includes a special evening at the Boom Chicago Comedy Club, canal tours, visits to the city's many museums, including the world-famous Van Gogh Museum. Don't just wonder about Amsterdam, experience the beauty and freedom of this unique city firsthand with CS Travel and NORML's Sensible Amsterdam Tour. Pricing information is available online at coffeeshoptravel.com. That's coffeeshoptravel.com. Or call toll-free at 800-816-1846. That's 800-816-1846. Be a sensible American. Visit Amsterdam with CS Travel and NORML this January. Call 1-800-816-1846 right now to book your trip. More information is available at NORML.org. And distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. This is your daily audio stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular audio podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about the show at our website, NORMLAudiostash.com. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. Back to NORML's Daily Audio Stash today. It is Friday, August 24th. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Take a moment to join us at NORML to help end prohibition in America. Just visit NORML.org to get involved today. Folks, marijuana prohibition will not stop until you get involved with reform, and the best way to do it is to join NORML or make your donation online right now today at NORML.org. And don't forget to catch our weekly NORML News podcast. That's a separate feed in NORML News this week. Alcohol and cocaine, but not cannabis, linked to violent behavior, study says. Denver voters to decide on pot deprioritization ordinance. And Warren Wilson College named top school for higher learning. All that's in the NORML News weekly podcast, and you can catch the text release right up at NORML.org. In today's program, we're going to have an artist showcase with Willie Nelson's daughter, Paula Nelson. She's got a band, and their CD is going to be coming out very soon here, but we have a pre-release track that was recorded live at the Austin Freedom Fest just a few weeks ago there in beautiful Austin, Texas. Paula was on stage along with the other performers in that benefit for marijuana law reform and groups like NORML. We also have our regular CelebStoner.com update with Steve Bloom. We're going to talk about a very cool Rob Cantrell comedy show. If you're in Washington, D.C. tonight or tomorrow, you can catch Rob Cantrell at the Riot Act Comedy Club in a NORML comedy show out there. Check that out, Rob Cantrell in Washington, D.C. More information about that show up at CelebStoner.com, and we'll have Steve with our Celeb Stoner update here in just a moment. Also in the program today, we have a very serious and important interview. Here on the program, we talk a lot about medical marijuana, and the folks who make that available are those who found and run medical marijuana dispensaries, patient collectives, and co-ops in the 12 states that allow medical access. In California, it's become tough to have a collective open. Oh yeah, there are hundreds open across the state, but there are dozens that get raided each year. Most recently, we focused on those raids in Los Angeles. Last year, we focused on the raids that took place in San Diego. Just a few weeks ago, there was a raid in Oakdale, California. We're going to speak to the gentleman who opened that collective and got raided just a few weeks ago. His name is Addison DeMoore. He was in court just this week in regards to the raid, and there was no judge there. In fact, he and the other defendants were told that the DA, the district attorney, is still investigating their case. They were brought up on state charges, but still, Addison's collective was raided. All the medicine was taken, and you're going to hear this story today. Addison really is on the front lines of this war against American marijuana smokers and the continued war the federal government wages against sick and dying individuals and those who wish to provide them with relief. So we'll speak with Addison DeMoore about the raid of his collective in Oakdale, California today. Also, we'll have Steve Bloom and also Paula Nelson today. It's a big show today, so make sure you join NORML. Make sure we end marijuana prohibition in America so that stories like Addison's no longer have to happen anymore, folks. Join NORML today at NORML.org. Now it's time for our CelebStoner.com update with Steve Bloom.
I want to be famous. I want to wear minks and satins and pearls.
Steve Bloom has his finger on the pulse of celebrity folks who enjoy a toke out there in the world. He reports on it all, along with marijuana news and information, up at CelebStoner.com. Steve, welcome back to the show today.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Doing very well today. Looking forward to the weekend this week for sure, man. Celeb Stoner is following a lot of the activity happening with the presidential candidates. And this week, you also have something up there about a possible endorsement from Mr. Real Time himself, NORML Advisory Board member Bill Maher.
Yeah, well, Bill Maher had was on a TV Guide interview. It was called TV Guide Close-Up, interviewed by John Fugelsang, who people may remember from VH1 fame years ago. And basically, it was a real, friendly interview, basically asking Maher about, coming up as a comedian in his life, that led to, becoming like the pundit that he is today. And he finally got around to some good, strong questions about who Maher was supporting right now, who he likes among all the presidential candidates. And, we watched the show quite a bit, and Bill Maher's Real Time begins again tonight. Another sort of season, kicks off. And Maher has kind of been leaning, in the direction of, I thought, maybe in favor of Hillary, because he had made some comments during his last run of shows, seemed to be in favor of Hillary, and so I really wasn't sure where he stood. Everybody knows Maher is ultra-liberal, and so when Fugelsang asked him, who's his favorite, he said, the one who is standing out to me is John Edwards, because his proposals have more teeth to it. They're bolder. He seems like a guy who's running with a little more abandon. He said his vote on Iraq was wrong, flat out, just made a mistake, wrong. Sorry, moving on. He said the war on terror is a slogan. He's saying some pretty bold things. He's acting like a man who's got less to lose than the rest of them, and that's usually the Democrats' problem. They run like they have something to lose instead of something to win. So, clearly, he likes Edwards. He's had Edwards on the show, and asked about Hillary. He basically said, I think she could get the nomination. I think she'd be an okay president, but I don't think she could get elected. So I guess his belief is, that Hillary's not electable by the fact of her personal baggage attached to the Clinton years, or because she's a woman. And then more humorously, Fugelsang asked Maher about the Republican candidates, and Maher had his usual quip. He goes, a ridiculous group of people. The top three are McCain, Mitt Romney, and Giuliani, two flip-floppers, and a cross-dresser. So he loves to dig at Giuliani for, doing those little antics in New York when he was mayor, and they would do these theatrical productions where he would dress up as Marilyn Monroe. So he just loves going after Giuliani for that reason. Anyway, he could go after Giuliani, he does, and certainly we do at Celeb Stoner.
And Steven, news about college life, which is just getting back into swing in campuses around the country this week. The Princeton Review had a list of the top pot-friendly schools, and that was highlighted in the NORML weekly press release as well. But Warren Wilson College down there in North Carolina is the most pot-friendly, number one on the list. Kind of a small school, though.
Yeah, it kind of cracks me up a little bit. Warren Wilson, I mean, it's like, Warren Wilson, who, what, yet, somehow or other that school, gets to the top of the list. And, it's a very liberal school, only 800 students. It's just out of Asheville, North Carolina, beautiful area in the Smoky Mountains, so it's probably just a really great place to go to school. And it started as a farm school, and it evolved. It was a 2-year, it was a 2-year school before, became like a 4-year school, and it kind of has a long history, and it was named after a theologian named Warren Wilson. That school, we don't know too much about Warren Wilson. I mean, one of the students who was quoted in the papers when the report came out from the Princeton Review this week about all these, these different categories, just to back up, what Princeton Review does is they interview 120,000 students, and they ask them all kinds of questions about schools, and it's a survey, and then they come out with all these different, statistics about, which school is the best academic school, which school is the worst, which is the party school, and then they break it down into like not only party schools, beer schools, marijuana schools. They call the category for marijuana reefer madness. So when you go to the Princeton Review site, you'll see, the list of the top 20 schools in the reefer madness category, which is kind of a goof because it's not reefer madness. I mean, they're just using that as a little slug at the top. But the question is how widely used is marijuana? So when they ask students in this long, survey that I guess students do, for the Princeton Review, for this report, they ask them a question about marijuana. What schools, more or less, how widely uses marijuana at particular schools, and so the students will answer. And so, the conclusion was based on this lengthy survey that Warren Wilson was number one. And as you say, the Bard of the South, well, Bard is number two. Bard's a New York-based school here up in New York, Annandale on the Hudson. And then, if you don't mind, I'll just run down the list real fast. Number 3, University of Vermont at Burlington. Number 4, University of California at Santa Cruz. Number 5, Lewis and Clark College, Portland. There's a lot of fun little schools that actually. For stoners out there who are like in high school and looking for cool schools, this list really kind of tips you off. Pitzer, number 6, Pitzer College out of Claremont, California. Never heard of that one. Hampshire College is number 7. Amherst, that's in that great little, scene in western, Massachusetts where there's all those schools up there, Smith and all those other colleges. Then New College of Florida, which is also a very small school in Sarasota. Number 9 is University of Texas at Austin, no surprise. Number 10, Sarah Lawrence College in Bronxville, New York. Number 11, West Virginia University in Morgantown. Number 12, Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut, another very liberal small school. Number 13, Guilford College, Greensboro, North Carolina. That was new to me. Number 14, Skidmore College, Saratoga Springs, New York. So there's a lot of New York State schools. Number 15, University of Colorado at Boulder. Again, no surprise. Number 16, Ithaca College, another New York State school. Number 17, University of California at Santa Barbara. No surprise. Number 18, Eckerd College, St. Petersburg, Florida. News to me. Number 19, Vassar College, another New York school, Poughkeepsie, New York. And number 20, Oberlin in Ohio, which, is very well known for, being a cool school. So it's a very interesting list. I wouldn't be able to come to this conclusion. They did it, with all their, heavy research. And so it's cool.
Also, Steve, a great comic who's been here on the Audio Stash, and I know is a friend of yours, Rob Cantrell, is doing some stoner comedy in Washington, D.C. this weekend.
Oh, yeah, Rob is taking kind of his show on the road. He's been doing a chronic comedy series once a month in New York at the Comics Comedy Club here in New York where, Celeb Stoner is based. And now Rob, in association with NORML and the Comedy Club, Riot Act Comedy Club in Washington, this weekend, tonight, and tomorrow, will be at the Riot Act Comedy Club doing a show called Ending Pot Prohibition show with Rob Cantrell. So I'm sure it'll be very similar to what Rob's been doing in New York. A bunch of comedians on the bill that probably are sort of pro-marijuana, may have some marijuana jokes in their routines, and then Rob will come out and do, the headline act. And Rob always ends his act now, especially I suppose when he's playing any of these, kind of marijuana-oriented comedy shows where he tells the story of how he got arrested in New York a few months ago for smoking, outside a club, and went through like a 36-hour, lockdown in the New York judicial system, which is kind of typical of what's happened to so many people in New York who've been arrested for, smoking in public. And so Rob tells that story, but he makes it funny. It's not a dry, sad story. And what's really interesting, besides this, show that's happening tonight and tomorrow, is the ad for it. If you go up to Celeb Stoner, you take a look. It's the Capitol building has been transformed into a beautiful glass bong. It's really sensational. I don't know who did the art for that, but Rob sent it to me, and he said, "Steve, you got to run this. This is great," and he's right. So, I'd hope that, people who are listening today, who are in the D.C. area will go support this. Support NORML, support Rob Cantrell, support stoner comedy.
Right on, Steve. Well, we have barely scratched the surface yet again this week in all of the content that's up at celebstoner.com. Folks, we have links to the site right up on ours at normalaudio-stash.com. Steve, thanks again for joining us this week. I look forward to speaking with you again next Friday.
Thank you very much, and have a wonderful weekend.
Steve Bloom is the man with his finger on the pulse of celebrity stoners of the planet and marijuana news. You can check it all out up at celebstoner.com. Steve also has some great photos from this year's HempFest posted up there. We have links to them right up on our website at normalaudio-stash.com.
You're listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash.
Our next interview today is a very serious one. We're going to speak with Addison DeMoore, who operated the only dispensary in Oakdale, California. It was the only dispensary for many miles in that area, serving a number of patients there until the local Stanislaus County law enforcement decided to raid Addison at his house and then close the dispensary. There are hundreds of dispensaries open in California, but local law enforcement as well as federal authorities like the DEA continue to raid them. Until we decriminalize marijuana on a federal level, or until we get marijuana moved from Schedule 1 in the Controlled Substances Act, this is what will continue to happen out there, folks. And that's why marijuana law reform truly is the most important social justice issue in America today. There is no reason that law enforcement needs to be harassing citizens and doing what you're going to hear about next to people like Addison DeMoore. So make sure you put your voice in and your support behind marijuana law reform, and do it today, because we all need to work together to end marijuana prohibition, both for medical access and to stop the arrest of almost 800,000 Americans a year for simple marijuana possession. Make sure you reform today. Make sure you get involved with reform. Don't just be a marijuana consumer. Don't just be an advocate in voice. Put your money where your mouth is. Put your time where your intentions are. Make sure to join a local NORML or join National NORML today. It is just so important, folks, that we have all of your support. Let's get to our interview now. Addison, thank you for joining us here today on NORML's Daily Audio Stash to share this story.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for joining us here today, Addison. First, tell us about the collective in Oakdale. When did you open up?
We opened on May 7th, and the patients were typical patients. I mean, people in care of help. People that came in pretty much just to get medication, to look for the best and most proper meds for the situation.
And, how about the physical description of the collective? What did it look like? How was it run?
The front of our, actually at our location, all the volunteers and staff wear scrubs to create and to give the patients the comfort feeling. They're coming in, they're bringing in their medical paperwork, they're having it verified through us, so we want them to be comfortable. The front of the store, there was a security guard at the front when you come in. We didn't have it so that our patients had to stand outside at all, because we didn't, because of the illnesses of some of them. It's pretty hot in Oakdale, and the sun beat right down on our front doors. So we actually tinted the windows, and we allowed them to come into the air conditioning in our reception area. Once you got inside, there was a large receptionist desk. There was a security guard, and then we had lotions, soaps, candles, all natural, THC lotion. We had hemp clothing, and we had a lot of literature, a lot of books about some political books. There was also some books out there for cultivation and other things for cannabis. And then you'd go into that area. You'd be received by the security guard, and you'd have to have your state California driver's license, and also either a third-party verification, either from OCBC or Medican, and you'd need a copy of your California recommendation from your doctor. And we would then verify you through the computer for OCBC or Medican, and we would also call your doctor. And then after that, we would do another process where we would actually verify the doctor with the California Board of Health to make sure, if there's any infractions against them, if they had been recently suspended or anything like that. So we actually had another step that we would take, for peace of mind and also just to legitimize even more the situation. So.
And up until this raid, how did you feel things were going for the collective there? Was there any harassment by police before this?
Well, yeah, we had the police were trying to do some intimidation things. I mean, as luck has it, we actually, after being open for a couple weeks, it came time for the 4th of July and the season up here. People are real patriotic. They want the sparklers for the street and everything else, and they had a fireworks stand in our parking lot, and it was the OPD's, the Oakdale Police Department, and it faced our front doors. And at first I realized it and thought about it. I said, man, this is definitely not a good thing, and I was kind of nervous about it, and the patients were nervous about it, but I think ultimately what it did is it just kind of like helped them show their true colors. I mean, after a little bit of time, when we all recognized each other, the first day they were there, I tried to bring them breakfast. I told them I had waters in the fridge for them if they needed cold waters to come over. Asked the security I get a cold water for them. Pretty much extending the olive branch and trying to be nice and, bring light to a situation almost. And they just instantly shunned me, didn't like me, told me they didn't need anything from me. And then after about I'd say a couple of days of it, that's when they really got bored and kind of their jock, good old boy mentality started coming out. And because that's really what you're dealing with here, they started catcalling and saying things to the patients and calling them potheads. Hey, pothead, go get your pot. And this is the police department. These are supposed to be volunteers in a booth collecting money via selling fireworks and raising this money for kids. Yet they're sitting there and they're doing this, and they're ultimately harassing and just disrespecting the patients. And I went out there and said something to them. And then as that happened, it was kind of the beginning of everything. Then they started having the police officers cherry pick, like the guys in the booth would sit there, watch the patients going in and out, and then a squad car would pull up, and it would sit there for a minute, and the cop would get out and talk to the guys. And then as soon as the patient would leave, they'd pull up behind the patient, and I have maybe between 9, maybe even 11 different cases that I had filed with information from the people. I'm telling about how the cops pulled them over and harassed them. And then I realized the solution. I actually went and got the city attorney's number because I figured out that he's the guy that defends these officers in a case like this. And I called him up, and I told him about the situation. And then I made a flyer that we put on our welcome packet for any patients if they'd been getting pulled over. And that made a stop to it, but then it started up with the Stanislaus County Sheriffs were doing it. So there was a little bit of turmoil in the beginning. The water was never really very comfortable, but I think that's kind of the road you take when when you force a city to provide safe and legal access, you're going to expect that, I guess.
And Addison, this was the only dispensary around, is that correct?
This is the only dispensary for patients within about 68 miles, I think.
Wow.
Because there's nothing in Stanislaus County. There's nothing in San Joaquin County. And that's why when I opened, a lot of people came to me and they just said, they wanted to comment about how insane I was or just how crazy I was. And the reason I did it and the reason why I decided to do it was that they weren't providing legal access and they weren't providing safe access. And what their policy was to pull people over. This is in Oakdale. Tell them that it was against federal law, confiscate their medication, and they had to go to court. They would confiscate their medical card, if whatever card it may be, OCBC, Medican. They take their card, take their script, take whatever they could from them, and then give them a court date. And then they go into the court, and the judge would pretend like there wasn't a law passed, there was no SB 420 or 215. None of these things existed, and ask them how they pleaded. Almost trying to trick them into, saying they're guilty of something they're not. And then it would go, into the legal system, we'd all be paying for this. Then it would go down the line, they'd present their California recommendation from a doctor, and the whole case would get dropped. And that's how this was going. And I just saw it as like, that's a big waste of time. If there's anything I could do to prevent that, this was it, and I got into this mainly. I've been, behind the movement for a while, but I got into this part of it because, for the simple thing of to make a difference and to make a living. I mean, I have to support my family. I have a son and I have a wife, and, everyone has to do that. But I wanted to make a difference, and I guess I did. I mean, I guess I made enough of a difference for them to react the way they did, so.
Now, Addison, tell us what happened the day of the raid. Tell us your experience there.
The day of the raid was actually about 6 in the morning, 6 a.m. It was Tuesday morning. I was sleeping in bed. My wife and my son were also in the house, and we heard a loud bang at the door. My wife ran to the window. There was one Oakdale Police Department vehicle out in front of my house. So she told me. I ran down to the door. I asked who it was. They said it was the Oakdale Police Department, and he needed to speak to me about something. And instantly I thought, well, maybe somebody broke into the business, and, I'm going to have to jump in the shower and get down there and see what's up. So I told him, I said, leave a note. And he, no, I need to speak to you right now. You need to open the door. And I said, leave a note. I'm going to jump in the shower. And then I looked through the hole, and I saw the SWAT team behind him. So I just instantly opened the door and knelt on the ground in the doorway. As I was on the ground in the doorway, the SWAT team came in over me, and they made a point, as they came over to me, to point their guns down at me. And I could feel the guns on my back and on the back of my neck and my head. And I laid on the ground just trying to look back at my wife, and they put the guns on my wife. They put my wife on the ground. They cuffed her. And that was pretty much the end of what I saw. They kind of picked me up at that point, and they carried me out. As I was being carried out, there was a woman there from the local newspaper, nice enough to take a photo of me in my underwear. I was led to the car, and they all high-fived and hooted. But at the same time, I guess, while that was happening, my wife told me that I could hear my wife yelling, the baby's upstairs. He's by himself. There's only the baby's upstairs. And they went upstairs like army men, aiming their guns and covering each other. And she said that they brought the baby down, and they were actually, covering the baby as they were carrying it through the house, with the guns. And just the story is so outrageous that, what they did, in fact, because they found nothing, I have no prior records of anything, no violence. I have no firearms in my house, anything like that. No record at all, other than a traffic stop. And they came into my house, and they said they'd been investigating me for 2.5 months. I mean, if they'd investigated me, they'd know that I'm a peaceful person. They could have come to the door with an officer and said, look, here's the situation at hand. I would have protested to it. I would not physically have protested to it, but I would, voice to them that I was not accepting what was going on because I know it's illegal. And they could have came into my house peacefully and done what they had to do. But putting guns on me and my wife, coming to my house, we came back into the house afterward, and they threw our wedding pictures in the sink, and just disrespected my home and came into it violently, and aggressively. And that's something my home's never seen. So it was very uncomfortable, definitely an uncomfortable situation.
All of this happened to you at 6 a.m. at your house. Then, what happened at the collective itself?
Oh, well, then they took me into custody. I went to a cell in Oakdale. My civil rights were further violated. We can get into that later, but then they went to my business. Well, they came out to the vehicle after I invoked my rights maybe 3 times. They continued to ask me questions, and they came out to the vehicle. And the last time he said, "Well, I want the keys to your business and your alarm code." And I told him no. I said, you have no right to even have me in the vehicle. Never mind that. So it's not going to happen. And he said, any respectable business owner would. I don't know what you're hiding, because any respectable business owner would give me the keys to their business. You have nothing to hide. And I just told them no. And next thing I know, they went over to the dispensary. They already had the warrant, I guess. They went in there and just put on scrubs and opened the business and allowed patients to come in. And this is the in here it's called the SCDEA, which is Stanislaus County Drug Enforcement Agency. And they did this, and I guess they're agents, but they're deemed by the state or by the DEA, deputized by the DEA, and they opened up business. They allowed patients to come in. They falsely verified them by looking at their card. They pretty much had our layout understood, and they laid their guys out in there in the same positions that we would normally be in, and they welcomed patients in. They falsely checked them at the computer, and then they sent them into the back. And once they went into the back and signaled that they were, ready to purchase medicine for themselves, the agent would step away, show his badge, and then bring them into the further back of the building where our lounge area was, and then interrogate them, sit them down, ask them what their ailments were, why they needed cannabis, and just they conducted this, these interviews and gathered information. And unfortunately, during that time, there were two patients that came that are caregivers, and they were detained and arrested and charged. And that's one of the things I regret the most, to see anybody else have to get dragged into this, especially a patient, so. But yeah, that's pretty much what they did.
And because this was Stanislaus County law enforcement, all of the charges, they're under state law.
Correct. Yeah, we were a nonprofit incorporated collective, and, we were recognized by the state of California. At no point were we under the impression we were committing a crime. At no point did we ever act like criminals or even conduct any criminal activity. So, yeah, completely under state law, completely done properly with attorneys in place. A corporate attorney helped me set it up, and Robert Raich, actually, and, it was done fully legally. And then to have the state come in, that's why I was so surprised. I mean, while this was all going down, I figured, okay, OPD's here, the SWAT team's here, DA is going to be here in a minute. That's what this is. I mean, that's normally the protocol, how things roll out. But to know afterward, to see that I'm being charged with, a health and safety code, violation, and these criminal charges, I see that, I'm like, this isn't, I'm not in Fresno, I'm downtown Modesto. This isn't even a federal charge. So it's just, there's a lot of hypocrisy, and I don't understand it. I mean, I can't see how so many people vote for something, how it is a law, it's in place, people get pulled over, and the officers are, well educated enough to read the recommendation, leave the medication, let the person go on their way. But to have this happen while that's happening, it's almost like, I told my wife, it's like, I feel like I'm caught in like a cheesy Rambo movie, like behind enemy lines, left by my state in a failing drug war. Like it really is. It's like a Chuck Norris MIA. Now I'm left here. I'm caught between state and federal law, and I'm almost crippled by the state, and the state is supposed to be supporting this. So it's really confusing. Definitely frustrating and confusing.
And have you been back to the collective since the raid?
Proudly, yes. I went back. I went back. I cleaned it up. I was getting ready to pretty much make it my activism headquarters. I had my rent paid. I was ready to go, and unfortunately, the landlord came and told me that he gave me a notice that said a 3-day notice to quit. And, I got to get in it with them and look a little deeper. I've contacted their attorney to find out if they're going to try to take my deposit and everything else. So I was actually blocked. But I've been there. I went there. I actually allowed a woman from the Modesto Bee, Eve Hightower. She came, and she wrote a great story initially, and I respected it, and I let her interview me, and she came there, and they took a few photos because I wanted people to see the patients that were part of the dispensary. I wanted them to see what they did to the dispensary, because I've always considered that theirs. That's what that was there for. That's the safe access. That's how it was supposed to work. So I wanted her to take the pictures. So it's been documented what they did, and it was kind of sad to go in there, but at the same time, it's just another part of it. It's kind of getting on with it and getting ready for what's next. So.
And what was removed along with the medicine there? What was the physical aftermath?
They stole all the medicine. They stole the computer. They stole all of the lotions, soaps, and candles, except for some. They weren't smart enough to move the shelf out of the way, and there were some soaps that fell down there. But they took the hemp clothing. I had Satori Clothing, which is a hemp company. Had some clothing from them. They took all of the literature and books, the political books. They took some things, some posters. My mother actually made in 1973 a large banner, and it said "Peace on Earth," and it was a large cannabis leaf, and it had a large peace sign over it. It was blue and green. It was all hand sewn. It was really nice. I've had it forever. I've had it for longer than I've been around, and they stole that. So they took some personal stuff. I mean, they were nice enough to leave behind a lot of dip. You know, they spit on the floor. They spit anything that they could spit into. It was like the locker room at like halftime or something. You know, they just kind of tore the place up. You know, tipped things over. They took the safe and cut the bottom out of the safe, and they just destroyed the place. They really came in. It was almost like as if a common criminal came in and robbed the place. They took everything of any value, and they left just kind of like a casing of what you had before. You know, it was just a wreck.
And Addison, you know, let me ask, you know, how are you going to move forward here? You know, what's next for you as these court cases play out, and what's next for you in providing patient care there?
I mean, I want everyone to know too is the other side of it that I see. I mean, being as horrible as it sounds and everything happening, I strongly believe that everything happens for a reason, and I just look at it as, in a way, it's a blessing, because for them to do this and for other cities to, you know, when this case goes through and ultimately they lose this case, and I think it should set some precedents in the state for local government to realize that if you work with people, I mean, owning a legitimate business, I want the business to thrive. I want to raise money for the city. I want to help the people in it because I'm obviously helping the patients. You know, just for them to learn and to see that because I'm taking that position, they should take that position. They should want to work with you. I mean, hey, even like, you know, trick me. At least come to me and pretend like you're working with me and then turn on me, because you'd at least be doing half of what's right. You know, and if I saw it as, you know, they very well could have came to me, because what came out is that there were they said there were complaints about the smell and traffic. And if there were, the city, and if that were true, the city could have came to me and said, listen, this is the situation. We've got some complaints. What do we do from here? You know, we want you to leave. What do you say to that? If they'd come to me respectfully and honestly like that, I would have considered it. I would have said, okay, let's rezone me. Let's put me somewhere so I'm not going to cause these problems for you. But it is still your job to provide safe access, and I'm going to be the other half of that. You know, and they did that in Tracy, California, which is just right down the road. You know, down 120, a couple, you know, maybe 20 miles, and they told those guys to leave. Those guys left. But me, because I stood up and I'm outspoken and I can defend myself and I know my rights, they decided to try to squash me. And they printed all these lies in the paper. But, you know, I think that the truth's in the air. It's going to come down, and everything's going to be fine. I mean, I honestly told my wife that I see it as a blessing. I see it as an opportunity for me to introduce myself to more people and to, you know, help with the cause and get things moving. So.
Righto. Well, it really does take a lot of courage to do what you do out there, Addison, and I just cannot thank you enough for joining us here today and sharing this story with us, our listeners here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash, when they talk about people being out in the trenches and making sure that Americans do have the care that they need, and also being in the trenches and this war against Americans that we have as the war against marijuana. You truly are it. So thank you again for taking time to join us here today on the Audio Stash.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Addison DeMoore is the founder of a collective in Oakdale, California. He was raided 3 weeks ago. He'll continue in court cases here on out. We'll follow his case right here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash.
What's up, y'all? This is Soja, and you are right now listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash. Big up yourself.
The Austin Freedom Fest was in many ways a family affair, with two of Willie Nelson's daughters performing on stage with their own musical acts. Amy Nelson was paired with Arlo Guthrie's daughter Kathy in the group The Folk Ukes. Those guys are really great. Sweet, sweet voices, great guitar playing, and some biting comedic lyrics. We have links to the Folk Ukes on MySpace. You want to check out their latest stuff. Later on in the night, as I mentioned, Paula Nelson was on stage with a full band. They gave a rockin' performance. Got a chance to interview Paula via phone earlier this week, and right after we play our interview here tonight, thanks to Wally Skinner at wallyskinner.com, an audio engineer down in Austin, we're going to play one of her songs on stage at the Austin Freedom Fest. All that's going to be here, but let's listen into our interview with Paula Nelson. Paula, it's great to welcome you here to NORML's Daily Audio Stash today. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, and thank you for having me.
It's great to speak with you today, Paula. Now, you're in the process of recording an album there at Ray Benson's Bismo Studios there in Austin. When will that album come out?
Late September, early October.
You've been doing a lot of live performance there in and around Austin. What's that experience been like playing in one of America's premier music cities?
You know, I've been doing it off and on now for probably about 10, 12 years. And, you know, in the early days, I probably had 3 or 4 different bands. And one band member in particular, Matt Hubbard, who's still with me. In fact, I'm his aunt-in-law now, which is kind of funny. He married my niece, and they have a beautiful son. We had been in bands, you know, like I said, over the last 10 and 12 years, but pretty much, you know, it's hard to – it's just so much music in this town, and there's nothing wrong with that except it's, you know, when you're in a band, it's really hard to get that right combination of people and to get the right music and the right combination, the chemistry between everybody. And this time around, I think we've just found that with the band that we have. You know, I've taken a couple years off. A couple years back, moved to Colorado and didn't do music and just kind of took a little break from it. And this time around, you know, with this new band that we have, it's just so much more fun and creative. And I don't know, I think everybody needs to take a little hiatus every once in a while. And I did a bunch of writing and other than, you know, I'm really enjoying the scene. To get back to your question, the Austin scene, it's just, like I said, when you have the right combination, it makes everything seem that much better.
Paula, you mentioned taking some time off from the music, and the business of music here is certainly a tough one. Do you think it's made easier or perhaps more difficult having this family connection to the music industry and the Austin scene?
Well, I think, again, you know, back to what I had said just a second ago, that all falls in line with it, too, is that back then, I'm 38, I'll be 38 in October, and, you know, back then I was in my early 20s, and I hadn't really been singing that much or writing that much, and so it was really difficult to try and break into the scene. You know, I had a couple record labels that wanted to sign me, but they'd never heard me sing, which I thought was odd, and, you know, was directly related to my father. And so that was kind of difficult, and I also was worried, too, that when I'd get up on stage that people were thinking, well, she's not as good as her dad, or, you know, there was that pressure. There was that pressure there, and I think, number one, just by continuing to, no matter what insecurities or reluctance that I felt, I just kept on doing it, and then when I took that time off, you know, this time around coming back, I've been writing, and I don't know, I just feel like I belong there a little bit more than I had before. So the pressure, there's definitely pros and cons of that. And that would be one of the pros and one of the cons.
Righto. Also, Paula, let me ask you this. You've got the MySpace page up for the band, the Paula Nelson Band, and being online is now such an important part of making music these days. Do you check up on the MySpace page? I mean, do you like this new venue for musicians on the Internet?
I do. I'm definitely a big nerd when it comes to computers. I absolutely love them. I love email. I love the MySpace, and you know, for many, many reasons, not just the networking ability, but, you know, you run into people you haven't seen in 20 years, or they find you, you know, and so, and it's really just a great way to get your music to be heard, and, you know, get out there and let people know what you're all about. So, yeah, I fully support that. I think it's wonderful.
Oh, right on, Paula. Well, everyone can check out the Paula Nelson Band directly at paulanelsonband.com. We got a great song from Paula Nelson recorded live at the Austin Freedom Fest. Many thanks to Wally Skinner at wallyskinner.com for rendering this up and sending it on by so we can play it. Here is Far Below. This is Paula Nelson and the Paula Nelson Band live on stage in Austin, Texas on August 10th.
Song called Far Below. Blame it on the waiting on, blame it on my mind. I'm jumping and turning, not coming back on the road. Blame it on the radio, blame it on those sounds. I'm taking it back, moving on. That's why I'm below. Waiting line, wasting all my time. I'm taking it back and I'm moving on. Baby's got his dimples on, waiting for my
Paula Nelson and the Paula Nelson Band there live on stage at the Austin Freedom Fest with that track Far Below. Many thanks again to Wally Skinner at wallyskinner.com for helping us get that track online. This has been NORML's Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Visit our website at normalaudiostash.com. You listen to the Audio Stash. Vote for us at Podcast Alley or other podcast directory services. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Thanks for listening today. Everyone have a fun summer weekend out there, and we're back at 4:20 on Monday. The podcasting technology of NORML is made possible by Red Aphid Interactive Media. More information at redaphid.com.